Well, hey guys, I just had a tooth pulled yesterday, and so pardon me if I talk a little funny in this video. Pretty soon I'm going to have the implant put in, and I won't be talking funny anymore. So get your giggles while you can. Well, hey guys, welcome back. I want to talk to you about something that when you watch this video that's coming up, I don't want you to get the wrong idea about how I feel about restorers and how people should restore and what people should expect when they have something restored for them. But I do want to say that I believe these old radios deserve our love, our care, our attention in a good way, right? That's why we do this. It is a hobby, I understand. But even in the hobby world, we need to set certain standards, right, and live up to them if we want to do it right. And I don't think there's any of you out there that doesn't want to do it right. I know I want to do it right, and I think everybody out there does. It might be a matter of not knowing what to do it right, but for the most part, people are willing to learn those things. The reason I bring this whole thing up is you're about to see a radio that I'm looking at for a customer just to give them an idea of how much it's going to cost to make it right. The radio was working, and then he left it on accidentally for some time, like a week. Came back, found it was still on. It was working, but playing really quietly. He turned it off, and the thing never played again. And he doesn't know what's wrong, and he's thinking that it just needs a couple of things to fix it, right? Whatever went wrong, we're just going to fix that and move on, call it good. I think he told me he bought the radio restored. The cabinet's pretty. The chassis is another story. The cabinet is pretty, but there's some things there that I didn't like too. But I'm going to stay away from that. I'm going to focus on the electronics. Okay. I adore the model that this radio is. And if I had the money to buy one, I would love to own one. But they're expensive. These are one of the few radios that cost a lot of money to get your hands on. And I think this gentleman did pay a lot of money for this radio. And I'm sad when I know that, because whoever did the work on this radio, like I said, I'm not knocking them. Maybe they didn't know. Maybe they did what they could do. But they didn't do a good job. It's plain and simple, man. They didn't do a good job. There's a lot wrong with it. I point out those things. I didn't do that to be someone who's griping. I am disappointed that somebody might have been told their radio was restored, and then this is what restoring is to the person that did the work. I'm going to propose to him that we go through and do it all correctly and do it again and give this radio the respect it deserves, and perhaps make it worth the money that he probably paid for it. It won't be cheap to do that. It's a 10-tube radio, and I charge a certain amount per tube, because we all know that the more tubes, the more complicated and difficult the circuit is generally. There are some radios for which I'll charge more no matter what. I don't care if it's a 2-tube radio. If it's German, I'm about doubling the price, because German radios are a pain in the to work on. But this is a good American radio from 1937. No problems working on this guy. He may not go for it, and that's okay. I'd feel bad if that's the case, because this radio deserves better. But that's his choice, all right? But the reason I'm putting this video up now versus when I would start this radio, if we do the project, if he accepts my proposal and we do the project, I'm not going to start this thing till late winter or early spring. But I'm putting the video up now because I want your opinion. What I'm asking for is your help on what the hell to tell this guy. All right? I'm not very good at this kind of conversation because I'm blunt, right? Before I worked at the factory I worked at here in Salt Lake, I worked at a steel mill, and I felt right at home there, man. If you know anything about steel mills, you know what I mean by blunt, okay? I'm not good at the kind of conversation that will require diplomacy to help this guy to get the idea that this radio needs some help. So I'd like your opinions, man. And maybe I'm all wet. Maybe I'm just panicking looking at this thing. So look at it with me. Tell me what you think. And talk about it in the comments, okay? I never asked for this before, but let me know in the comments what you think about what you see and what you would tell a customer who spent a lot of money on a radio, and you're about to tell them that maybe they'd have to spend a lot of money again to make it worthwhile. So I'd love to hear what you guys think. A lot of smart people out there. A lot of you guys out there. I've read every comment. I tried to reply to every one of them. Y'all have told me. A lot of you have told me that you worked in the radio repair world years ago. You spent a lot of time in it. So I really value and respect and admire your opinions and your experience. So I can use some help on this. So with that, guys, let's start the video. I've already yammered on too long about this right now. It's just because I'm so doggone upset about it. I want you to take a look and tell me if I should be. Remember, this guy was told this radio was restored. So you let me know what you think. All right, guys, let's go. Welcome back, my friends. This beautiful radio that you see in front of you is a Zenith, a 1937 Zenith, model 10S130. Now I know this is 1937 because of the 1 in the 130. The way Zenith named their radios, at least for a time, was that last set of numbers, the 3-digit number, told you the year and then the cabinet style. So, and they started doing that in I think it was 30. It might have been 36 with a 0, but I don't think so. I think they started it in 37 with the 1s, and then an 8S463 is a 1940. But anyway, we have a 10S130, beautiful radio. Customer brought to me and asked me to check it out. The first thing you notice, of course, is that the tuning doesn't appear to be working with the knob. So we know about Zeniths. I'm pretty sure there's a broken dial string because I thought I saw it. But I'll also check the O-ring underneath. I'm not sure if this chassis has an O-ring or not. This thing has some cool features. Of course, it has all these nice knobs. I love the squared off circle. You know, the black dial Zeniths with the squarish escutcheon are my favorites. But it has this thing here, and I don't know much about it. It's not a tuning eye. It uses a light bulb. I'm not quite sure how it works, but it's like a tuning target. You know, I'm going to learn about them as I go. So if you guys know something, you might want to give me some hints. But I'm telling you, look at how imposing this cabinet is. Okay, this is me. It's on my bench, and I'm standing next to it. This thing starts below my waist and goes all the way up to my cheek. I mean, this is a big cabinet. And of course, you would think so with a 10-tube radio. That's what the 10S means. The 10 means 10 tubes. That would have to be a big cabinet. It would have to be a really rich sounding radio. And from what I know about these, that's exactly what they are. Now, the owner of this radio says it was playing and then it just stopped playing. He said he left it on. I think he said he left it on for like a week. Came back to it and it wasn't playing anymore. Actually, he said it was playing, but kind of quietly, and then he turned it off, and he turned it back on, and it never made sound again. So I'm not sure what's going on with it. It could be anything. He thought it might be a rectifier tube, so he bought a new rectifier. And whatever the problem is, we'll find it. And we are going to, you know, kind of go through this radio and see what's been done to it and what it needs. You know, if I can get it to play, well, then I don't really need to test the IFs and the oscillator coil and the antenna coil and all that, because if it plays, then those things are obviously working. But if it doesn't play, then I got to go through and take DC resistance measurements of all of those coils. The owner of this radio asked me to let him know two things. Number one, what would it take to make it work again? Just work again. That's usually not my mode of doing things. As you know, I like to restore them because things, once you restore one part of a radio, if you don't restore other parts, you know, like if you don't replace all the capacitors, pretty soon they start failing if you use the radio regularly. So I prefer to do the other approach that he also asked me to quote, and that's a restoration of the electronics. The cabinet doesn't need restoration. I'm not going to, the cabinets are usually not my concern. When it's my radio, they are, and very, very seldom I'll do it for a friend. But anyhow, I'm going to check out the electronics, and I'm going to do that by taking out the chassis and putting the cabinet somewhere nice and safe, like in another room that I never go into. Now, before I do that, I am going to put a rectifier tube in this thing, and I'm going to see what kind of current it draws You know, if it seems to be drawing current but yet it's not playing, then I'm going to check all the other tubes on my tube tester. That'll be the starting point for where I'm at. If I find a bad tube, well, then I'll replace that tube and then I'll play it again and see if I get better results. And if none of those things yields a playing radio, then I'll pluck the chassis out. Well, I have to pluck it out anyway to do the tuning, the dial string, and to check out that O-ring. So this chassis is going to come out. I thought I would document that for you because this is a radio I've never done before, and I doubt a lot of you has done one of these big Tombstone Zeniths. I mean, this is a gorgeous piece, man. So, you know, sit down, buckle in, grab yourself a bit of your favorite beverage, and let's get started. Okay, so why don't you hang out while I get the rectifier tube back in this slot here. As you can see, this is a pretty imposing chassis. Even the chassis is big and imposing on this. Let me zoom in and show you how that tuning indicator looks, okay? Okay, if you look right here, you can see that there's an ordinary lamp bulb right here, and there's some kind of a little box, and I'm not sure what that box is all about, but I'm going to try and find out, okay? That's going to come later. I'm going to do some reading about it before I start fiddling with it, okay? I don't like to fiddle with things I don't know anything about. So let me find out about that, and then I'll give you the details once I know. I've seen the target tuning eyes, the ones that, you know, have like a 3-section target that lights up, but I've never seen anything like this. This reminds me a little bit of the shadow meter on Philco's, but it's not exactly the same thing. It might work on a similar principle. Who knows? We'll take a look because I just don't see how that works. Okay, we're going to try the first tube here. We're going to try replacing that rectifier with this 5Y3 GT. This is a new old stock General Electric tube. It's a good tube, really nice looking tube. I'm going to put that one in the radio, and then I will reserve this other new tube that he's got his hands on, and this is a Russian. Okay, and the tube number on it looks like it is 1703. So this is equivalent to a 5Y3. I don't know much about Russian tubes. I understand they're getting better and better, and they're better than Chinese tubes, but I don't know any of that to be a fact. I just know that I try real hard to use only American tubes, and I can usually get away with it. I have a tube source for good used and new old stock tubes right here in Salt Lake, so I have it pretty easy. So I put that rectifier in. Now I'm going to plug this into my Variac, and which is driven off my isolation transformer. But the reason I'm going to do this is, of course, I have an ammeter on my Variac, and I'm going to watch that current as I go. And if that current spikes, now you're not going to be able to see it, okay? But if that current spikes, I'll shut it down immediately before anything bad can happen to it. If it doesn't draw any current at all, then I'm going to assume that there's something more serious wrong with the power supply, and I'll take a look at it. So right now I'm going to plug it in and we'll give it a try. Let me turn on my isolation transformer. All right, this time it didn't kill the lights. The LED lights in this room make my transformer buzz a little louder. I'm not quite sure why. They're not supposed to draw much current. All right, Variac is on. All right, let me figure out how you turn the radio on. Let me tip it back just a hair. All right, there we go. Band. Okay, the band is broadcast band, which is band A. I'm not going to be able to tune it, but I will be able to bring power up. So here we go. I'm going to report out to you what we're getting, okay? Current is going up, and I'm at about 30 volts. Current went up a tad, went up to about a little less than a quarter amp. I'm at 50 volts now, and we're right about a quarter amp. At 60 volts, we haven't really moved much in current. Now I am drawing current, so I'm pretty sure the filaments are good. Let me take a look at them. Do I see filament light? Let me kill a light here for a minute, guys. Hard telling yet. If you can live with this low light, I'm going to continue going. 1/4 amp at 60 volts. 70 volts, and the current went up a little bit. It's almost 1/2 amp now. 80 volts, and it's at 1/2 amp. I hear hum. Okay, so audio is working. What I can do is try to tune it a little bit. When I manipulate this, I do hear static. I'll turn this slowly. Let's extend this antenna. I do believe it's not that far from working. Put this antenna up here in my window blind, guys. That's what I usually do. All right. Let me move this up a little bit. Come up to 90 volts. We're at 90 volts. We're at about 0.6 amps. Okay, there's a faint radio station. You probably can't hear it. Let me turn the volume up. We're running 0.6 amps at 90 volts. Okay, turn off the noisemaker, eh? It's tuning. Okay, there we go. Real strong station. And it tuned right on it.
Healthcare costs. It's called chastity. Just
okay, there's Dave Ramsey. Yeah, it's definitely working. But there's some pretty serious hum in this thing. I don't even have it at full voltage, and it's humming pretty good. So I don't really want, I really don't want to do any more with bringing the power up. I'm going to leave it. I hear the hum. Let's just be careful with it. I know the audio is working, the RF is working, the IF's working. Everything in this radio is basically functional. It might just be a matter of replace power supplies. Maybe look if there are paper and wax capacitors. I'll recommend to him, but that's going to be up to him. All right, I'm going to shut this thing down. So I've answered that first most important question. Can it run? Are there any major parts like a transformer failed? And it doesn't appear to be, so that's a really good thing. So I'll tell you what, I'm going to set up to pull the chassis out, and then you guys can watch me do that if you want to. Okay, first thing we have to do when we take something like this apart, of course, is to take the knobs off. These are just simple pull-off knobs, at least this one is. They're beautiful knobs. These are some of those that I am making with wooden replicas of with my 3D printer. Alright, there's the other one. There's another one. These are all pull-off. Real nice, I like that. Now this one here has a standard flat set, straight bladed set screw, so no big deal. Alright, just one of them. Okay, we put these knobs in a baggie. 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. Never hurts to have a good supply of different sized baggies. Okay, put those in a box. I don't need to do anything with the escutcheon, but you should have warned me, guys. Come on, this was sitting right here in front of you and you didn't let me know. I'm going to put that little felt washer in here with the knobs. Okay, so we are done on the front side. That's all there is to it. The speaker is connected with is hooked up with a connector. So I'm going to go ahead and disconnect it. I'll turn this thing around. Okay, so first things first. Okay, I'm going to take these tubes out of here. Take the fragile stuff off first, guys. Always take the fragile stuff off first. And if you can get to it before you pull the chassis, more the better. Now, Zenith radios, the tube sockets are labeled, so you don't have to worry about what it is, writing down what it is. This has also got a 6L6 output. I love the 6L6, man. Just a big, rich sound. This will be a push-pull, so this tube here should be a 6L6 also. Grab it by the base right here and wiggle it a little bit. Yup, 6L6. Beautiful, beautiful tubes. Nothing sounds like a 6L6, except the only tube I like better than the sound of a 6L6 is a 7591. All right, this here is a 6C5. Now it says 6C5G. It doesn't matter if there is a 6C5GT. That wouldn't matter. It would still work just fine. And there might even be a 6C5 in the middle tube. That's okay too. It does not matter which one you use. Let me close that tuning condenser before it makes me sorry. Pull off this grid cap. You want to turn them just a little bit, okay? Just turn them a little bit as you lift that off of there. That way you're not loosening the cap on top of the tube. Remove the tube shield. These Zenith ones are nice and heavy duty. This is probably a 6A8. Let's see, what is it? Where's the number on this thing? Well, there's two ways to deal with this one. Let's take a look in there. What do you see there? 6K7. This will be an IF tube. Okay. Very good. Set that aside. Let's go ahead and pull this grid cap off right here. Real slow and gentle, and you turn it back and forth. And you grab the tube shield and gently lift it off of there. All the tube shields are pretty much the same, so you don't have to worry about it. You get down there best you can and you grab it by the base and lift that off. Okay, let's see what tube that is. There's the 6A8. Nothing more on this side. Those are just electrolytic capacitors right there. Okay. So that must be a choke coil right there, because the output transformer is up there on the speaker. So that's a choke. It may be, however, an interstage transformer. I'll have to look at the circuit diagram, which I don't have just yet. Okay, let's pull this one. Again, turn it back and forth. Sometimes even doing that, they'll still come loose. There's a way to repair them, but it's a pain in the butt. Okay, tube shield off of there. Grab hold of that if you can. Sometimes you can't get your hands around the base, so then you wiggle it a little extra. Try to work it loose. There we go. Okay, now we got this little guy down here. I bet that's a 6H6. Yep, 6H6. Here's another tube. Okay, 6C5. Alright, 6C5. Sorry about the bad camera work, guys, but I think it's important that you see a little bit more of what I'm doing here. What's this guy? These are in there tight, man. They haven't been out in a while. That's also a 6C5. Okay, so all the tubes are out. Let's just go through and count all these tubes just to be sure, okay? That we have the 10 part right. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So we are right. This is a 10 tube radio. There's the beautiful Zenith speaker. So all the hardware is going to be on the bottom side. We're going to lay this chassis down, or this cabinet down, and we're going to loosen it with it laying down. But what I'm going to do first is remove that speaker plug so that this thing doesn't get damaged while we're doing that. The Zeniths just pull out. Some radios like Stuart Warner's and such, they have a screw that holds them in, not the Zenith. But I have an extension cable for Zenith, so I can put the cabinet at one end of my bench and run the cable to my extension to the speaker, so I'm not anywhere near the dang speaker when I'm working. Guys, there are 4 bolts on this thing holding this chassis in. When I do that, it's going to want to drop down, but it's right up against this here anyway, so I might be able to just lift the cabinet up off of it. Kind of like lifting the body of a Volkswagen off of the engine and off of the pan. So there are 4 bolts. 1, 2, and then 3, 4. I don't know if you can get all of them in camera. Well, it's just bolts, man. There's no mystery to it. Okay, this one was loose. This one's not too tight. I like to loosen. I should have not taken that one out. The better way is to loosen one, or I'm sorry, to loosen all of them before you remove any of them. Okay. Now I'm going to leave this one in. When I tilt it back, in fact I'll turn it in a little bit, that makes me nervous. I'll take these out. And then when I tilt, I'm going to tilt it upright. I'm not comfortable having it drop out without me being able to control it. So let me get that. Now it's probably going to turn a little bit when I get this one out, but that's okay. This one's kind of tight. It might just be because it's sitting in there with a lot of pressure on it. There's a thick towel under it, so don't be alarmed if you hear a clunk as it kind of drops down. Yep, it's going to. So here we go. There we go. Okay. It didn't hurt it any, I promise. Now let's stand her up. The chassis is still in there. That's what I wanted. And now I'll get my wrench and I'll get under here and get this last bolt, and then I can slide the chassis out the right way. Always the last one is the tight SOB that doesn't want to come out. It's always that way. You see, it's all rusty. It's always the last one, man. When you've got to hold the chassis with your other hand. Let us slide this beauty out of here. I'm going to grab a hold of this transformer. It's the most solid thing on the radio. Let me get this cable out of here. Somebody had put in a jack for listening to like your phone. Sometimes those work great and sometimes they don't. So I'm going to assume this one works great. Okay. Boy, I smell gasoline coming from outside. That's nerve-wracking. Okay, you see what I see in there, right? There are a couple of pieces of like foam in there. Probably they were used as shims, it looked like, right up in here. So we'll investigate that. These rubber mounts are like new. They're very in good shape. They're dirty, but they're in good shape. So whoever worked on this last time didn't really clean this up in here when they put it together. That's the kind of detail, man, that people ought to pay attention to. You know, my father was an auto body man. Now, my parents were divorced, and I didn't live with my father, but I was around him just enough to see what he did. If I learned anything from my father, it was work ethic, man. He had his own body shop up in Escanaba, Michigan. His own body shop, and he was a perfectionist, man. No car ever left his shop that wasn't absolutely perfect, that he wouldn't be proud to show to anybody. I try to be that way, even if I don't make perfect. Man, I try to make it as good as I can. I'm not sure what's going on with this here. So it looks like there's some more of it here. I'm just going to leave that because the cabinet's not my charge. That's not my thing on this radio. Okay, so there is some looseness right in here. I could feel it when I was lifting it right there. Sometimes people, I'll have to tell them about this because sometimes people like to lift tombstones and cathedrals from this brace up here. But you really should never do that. These radios are heavy enough that you're going to cause separation in these areas, especially as the glue hardens and dries out over time. And so what I'm going to recommend to him is that he never carry it that way. I would never carry a radio that way at all. There's a little L bracket right here. It looks like it was used as a brace. And I'll show it to him. I'm going to move this cabinet out of the way because this is really not what I'm working on. Okay guys, let's show you what I am working on, okay? Alright, this is the chassis. Let's get a look at what's underneath, okay? We'll look at what's on top a little later. There is quite a bit of corrosion on this tuning condenser, and I really believe it needs to be cleaned up. And also, see how loose it is? There's supposed to be grommets there, and it looks like there are no grommets there right now. That's why it's so loose, and that's not good because it won't sit properly, and it's going to be subject to vibration. Now I'm looking up here, and you can't see it maybe, but maybe you can. There's an original, here it is. This is the original, looks like it's either the original belt or it's an original style that was replaced at some point in the past. I use O-rings because these things don't last, and they usually break suddenly. And I have a supply of O-rings. You can get these online at Adams Manufacturing, and they sell fantastic ones. They're great. And if you want to buy the kit that uses square rubber, you know, square section rubber, you can buy that from Radio Days, and you can make your own, okay? But I don't like to use these unless I have one that is absolutely perfectly flexible. So there's a lot of, it's hard to show you, but there's a lot of wire that's kind of beat up, and this one here is frayed pretty badly back here. So I'm going to have to let them know about that. These the light sockets are really loose, so they're not going to be working right because they're pretty loose. This one's tight. This one here is a little loose, but not terrible. This here is loose also. Okay, this is the kind of stuff, these are details that ought not be left that way. So I'm going to have to let them know about all these details. Luckily, these grid cap wires look to be pretty good. There's a little gimmick capacitor right here. A lot of people see that and they're like, what the heck, and they take that out, but that needs to stay. It's part of the final tuning when they would do it on the bench. Let's look at the underside, okay? Now, remember, this guy told me that it was restored, but I don't know if he meant just the cabinet or if he meant the chassis too. Alright, so let's lay this down. If I'm real gentle about it, I won't hurt it. I'm going to use this baggy box as a cushion, okay? There we go. Okay, let's take a look. This was worked on. I don't like the work at all. The soldering jobs aren't that great. For this electrolytic capacitor should never be soldered up against. I mean, it's soldered right to the can dome, man. No terminal strips, nothing. This is just a bias capacitor right here. But these two power supply capacitors are soldered. All three of these are soldered right to the can dome. You see the wiring? That's bad juju, man. That wiring needs to go. That's bad stuff. These should all be redone. There may be good capacitors, but they were done poorly. This little resistor right here, it's a quarter watt, I know. But I'll bet you anything it's not rated at the voltages that are seen on this radio. Of course, I don't know what part of the circuit that is, but I'll bet you money that that's not rated. I never use anything less than a half watt in any tube radio, ever. Ever. And I typically will do 1 watts if I can fit them and I have them. So this is it's supposed to be a single belt that goes between this flywheel and up there in the clockwork for the tuning. We're going to look at that clockwork for the tuning in a little while. But there's some pretty rough soldering in here, and people, you know, I'm sure he was doing the best he could do, but this is the kind of stuff, man. When you get into a radio like this, you got to pay attention to detail. This is a valuable radio, number one. This particular radio is worth more than the average radio, quite a bit more. And these black dial Zeniths, especially the big, imposing tombstones, need to be treated with a lot of respect and love, man. You got to love these things. And obviously, whoever did some of this work in here didn't love these things. Never ever solder, you know, the way these in midair like this, unless you are using shrink tube. Okay, it's okay to do it, but use some shrink tube and do it properly, man. A lot of these, I don't get it, man. They just look awful. They did replace all the paper and wax. That's good. They used some disc capacitors, which I don't like to use. They're in the audio circuit. I guess they're okay, but really they ought to be better capacitors than these. These things drift, and so I mean I would still use good, 630 volt film capacitors, and I would do that properly. There's some corrosion in here. I don't know if you can see it. You probably can't. Oh, I guess you can. There's some corrosion in here that I would like to deal with. You can tell there's a lot of copper in this coating on these things because of the green corrosion. I imagine the can dome is maybe okay, but truth is, with the low volume, who knows? I might just consider replacing the steps of the can dome if I did this radio. It's going to be hard for me to talk to this fella and tell him, hey man, whoever did the work on this radio didn't do a good job, and it really, if you want the radio to be worth what it can be worth, you need to needs to have a good job done on it. It looks like they're still using, maybe they restuffed this can. I'll have to look at it closely, see if it's been apart. But they're using this post here as the ground, which is what it was. And this wire goes to the capacitor lead here. It's probably been restuffed considering they replaced everything else. But my God, you can't leave wire like that, man. You just can't. All right, they didn't put a fuse in this. There needs to be a fuse in a radio like this. I have no idea how they did this thing. I mean, maybe it's okay, but I don't see an isolating capacitor. You need to have an isolating capacitor in something like this. Honestly, guys, this needs more work than I thought it was going to need, and it's going to make me sad to tell the guy. All right, enough griping about the bottom side. You see what we got here, all right? In my view, and I'm going to post this because I want your opinions on this, even though if I do this radio, I'm not going to get to this radio. I'm not even going to start on this radio probably till late winter, all right? But I'm going to post this so that I can get your commentary on it. What would you tell the guy? Would you advocate doing a complete recap and redoing all this work? I'm a detail person, and this work is sloppy in my opinion. I don't see any safety capacitors to ground off of here. Okay, no safety caps. It needs safety caps. I don't see any filter caps at all. We got wire deteriorating, right? It's deteriorating just 2 inches from where the wire is sitting up against the chassis. You know that is going to fray up to this point at some point. And down here, see, it is fraying right here where it's touching the chassis. It's bad juju, man. But I would like your opinion. Maybe I'm all wet, maybe I'm overreacting. I happen to love black dial Zeniths. I think they're outstanding radios, and I hate to see one not be treated right. Okay, let's take a look at the top side, okay? We'll see what we can see. We're not going to be able to see much with this dial arrangement on there. Let's see what you can see. You see the gear down here? These need to be cleaned. Somebody caked a bunch of grease on that thing. These are brass gears. They don't need lubricant. The most you should ever do on these is a little bit of light machine oil. Brass gears, guys, do not need grease. Let me say it again. Brass gears do not need grease. Light oil is all you need if you need anything at all. This is all out of alignment. You hear it rubbing. I'm not sure if the spring is working or not. Everything is so stiff in this thing that I can't tell. So the way the spring is when you tune it one direction, it kind of puts tension on the spring, and the spring helps it return the other direction. I think it's working because I can feel it. Yep, it's working. So that spring is still attached. It's still doing its job, I think, or at least partially. But this thing is filthy. It's dirty. It's greasy. All this needs to be cleaned. This tuning condenser needs to be cleaned. This, like I said, is all a mess in here. This needs to be cleaned. I probably can't get it all the way right because it looks like either somebody painted it or something, because there's like a silvery or gray material here on top of this copper look finish, okay? I don't know if that, it's probably rusty under there, and that's why they did it, and that I would probably advocate leaving alone. But all these frayed wires, this stuff here, this tuning condenser needs to be taken off. This needs to be cleaned. It needs to be coated with rust preventative, like a rust preventive chemical, and then it needs to be painted. And if I would have to hand paint it, I would hand paint it, okay? It needs to look good, man. This is the kind of radio, it's a small radio, so it's easy to turn and look behind it. So people are gonna look behind it. It needs to look good. Let's look at the dial face, okay, and see what we have there. Okay, these just need to be cleaned. They look pretty good. They're a little worn here because this is all out of adjustment and these things are all rubbing. They shouldn't rub like that. And besides, there's supposed to be some felt back there. If it's going to rub, it should rub on felt, and there's nothing. Alright, so this gasket material is almost gone. Okay, there's supposed to be a rubber gasket around here. That keeps the glass from vibrating. That's supposed to be there. I imagine this cardboard gasket maybe could work okay. But they did some funky things with wire here. None of this is right. This is done with like it's almost like using a twist tie. But it just looks sloppy the way it's done. These all rub. Okay, that's gonna wear these out. It's gonna be a worse version of this right here. This one's rubbing. This switch, first off, this is the tone control. Alright, or I'm sorry, sensitivity. Some of them, the tone control is over here. So, sensitivity, and the switch is loose. They left a paper and wax capacitor on it, so that needs to go. This little switch here is in place and it's firm, but it's dirty. It's really dirty. It needs to be cleaned with deoxit, or Larry's deoxit substitute. And it needs to be adjusted so it's not rubbing, okay? I can tell this hasn't been like this for long. Somebody did this work fairly recently, relatively recently in its life, because it's not worn yet like this here, but it will be. These are almost always a little worn, okay? Because this gets used more than anything, and even with felt there, it'll wear it some. But there's no felt on these. This is just not right. And this switch, by the way, I can't hardly feel the detents, so it needs to be cleaned. Obviously, the cans need to, I don't see evidence that they were restuffed, but I'll look at them much more closely if he has me do the job. I don't know why in the hell he would use them if they weren't restuffed. In fact, I don't know, I think they're wet capacitors, because that center post and the rubber seal, that kind of hints that they're wet capacitors. You see those a lot in Philcos of this day too. As I mentioned, this thing is loose. Okay, you can see that's moving this can right here. I think that's an IF can. The tuning condenser is loose. Alright, so we got all this loose stuff, and this is out of adjustment. So here we go, man. I don't know how they did this thing. I do these too. There's nothing wrong with it, but well, just trust me. You drill a hole there, and you didn't put a grommet. It's just barely big enough for the wire to go through. So you can already feel the wire's got, it's got sort of rough in the insulation right there. Oh my gosh, this kind of thing makes me sad. And I know at some point the owner's going to see this video, and I feel bad saying all this, but I can't lie about it, man, because the radio is going to outlive both he and I if it's done right. If it's not, it's going to wind up in a landfill, and I don't want that to happen. So I think I know enough information. I know it will play. So it is restorable. But I think, the guy that did it before him, I probably told him he restored it. What he did was recap it. But you got to fix the wiring, okay? You got to align it properly. You got to replace the tuning, the tuning drive, like the rubber. You got to put new grommets in. You got to put new grommets in for this guy if there are grommets. Otherwise, you got to secure it tightly. You got to use good capacitors and not leave the old ones in. I mean, that's not restored. Throwing a few yellow film capacitors at it isn't restored. So, I know enough to do what I need to for this guy. And I'm going to post this one, like I said, right away. I want your opinions, guys. Let me know what you would say and what you think. And also, give me your opinion on people that call themselves restorers and they do this kind of work. I'd love to hear some more people spout off rather than me just on a rant, okay? Alright guys, I'm going to close this video down. I'm probably not going to edit it very much because I want to get it up soon. So I'll shut her down now. From your western outpost in Salt Lake City, looking at a Zenith 10S130, this is Michael, and that's all for now.